Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Monday morning. We're all shaking it off from a weekend of, basketball, hockey. We've already talked about those two things. I took my kids to their first proper concert on Saturday night. Everybody is shaking that off from here. Miguel Martin, you are the CEO of Aurora. Jeremy Burke, you're my co-founder and our editor-in-chief. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. Back and forth this weekend. I know Jeremy's here. You were here. We're like, it's all Toronto-centric all the time. As far as I'm concerned, Toronto is the center of the world, but not everybody always feels that way. But this group this week, I think it feels that way.
It sure is. We feel that way.
Good. Me too. That's what I've been trying to tell people. You just announced full year and fiscal year 26 fourth quarter results. Give us the thumbnail sketch, then we're going to dive in, Miguel, if that's okay.
Sure, you got it. Well, it was a great year over year. We had record earnings, record adjusted EBITDA. We made, I would say probably two big announcements. One is we are completing the transition over to entirely medical. So we had a pretty small rec business, and we're getting out of that. The final pieces of that in September, which we think is consistent, with really what we're good at and our focus. Secondly, we divested ourselves of our non-cannabis business, which was a propagation business. The international was the story, particularly in Europe. And there's a lot of growth there, and we're really excited about where we're going.
Jeremy, I'm going to go first because
go ahead. Yeah,
there's a trend. I think there's a trend here, but almost an accidental trend. One, certainly you've been trending this way for some time with the increase in medical business, almost the sole focus sort of on that, and the international markets at that further. But, or in addition to that, the U.S. is now refocused in some way on medical cannabis because it's been rescheduled on the medical side. I mean, I guess the question is is it interesting to you to see others now focus on medical cannabis because of what's happening in the U.S.? Or is it like, well, welcome to the party, everybody. We've been here for years.
I think it's probably more the latter. We've always been, Aurora started as a medical company. It's the largest provider of medical services to veterans in Canada. We're proud of that. And over a decade of experience in it. Medical cannabis, in our opinion, has, three key attributes. One is it's the fastest growing. So everybody wants to talk about rec, and I understand that's an interesting story, but medical cannabis is the fastest growing. Secondly, it doesn't go backwards. So once you have that, you see that progress. Right now, over half the countries in the EU have a medical cannabis construct. And lastly, it's the most profitable. And so, when you look at all those attributes, now it's also the hardest, and I'll be happy to talk about that aspect of it. But yeah, we've been talking about medical cannabis for a long time as a, key area of opportunity. And we've seen many of our competitors now understand what that's like, particularly Canadian companies, which have, which are the leaders globally. I mean, medical cannabis from Canada is considered the highest quality medication in the space in the world. And now that you have GMP standards increasing, Canada becomes even more important on the global stage.
Yeah. Miguel, I'd love to understand what the competitive landscape looks like now. Piggybacking off Jay's question, Germany is very much open, Europe is open, but now, American companies with rescheduling are probably looking at Europe as well. So how do you think about the competitive landscape, and how do you think this is going to change over the next 4, 6, 8 months?
Yeah, I mean, one aspect of the medical business is it's more consolidated because it's harder and requires a lot more expertise. So typically our competition, say, in Germany or Poland or other aspects of Europe, are the same players. These are folks that have experience and history in GMP production, which that standard is becoming so important and becoming more difficult. Those that can do the permitting and the dossiers and the registrations, those that have government, relation resources and legal resources and QA resources to navigate, what is a bit of a differing standards. And so, in Germany, as an example, there's probably 4 companies that do 65% of the business. In Poland, 3 companies, we happen to be the largest, do 90% of the business. So it's a much more consolidated piece of business, but it is a lot of the same competitors. In terms of the U.S., Curaleaf's the largest that operates in that market. It's a totally different execution for the American companies, particularly GMP certification and all the regs. So we haven't seen a lot of it. I know there's some that have talked about it. It is different. We have a lot of respect for that. But it's been the Canadian companies, again, that, have the history with the Canadian, sort of legal framework that have been able to successfully navigate it. And you can grow flower in Canada in a GMP facility like we have, and two of the largest outside Toronto, and ship it around the world. So there are a lot of efficiencies in having these large sort of Canadian style GMP factories. We do have one in Germany, but most of our production is in Canada.
Can I ask you another question, Miguel? And that is, you mentioned Germany, you mentioned Poland, and it seems that the sort of the patient demand and the cannabis supply don't match up, right? There's excess patients to demand, which is why Canadian companies have done so well, notwithstanding the sort of regulatory environment that is challenging, but also that Canadian companies are ahead with GMP and the facilities and the cost structure and all that. But I actually wonder, is there a desire when you're in Germany, when you're in Poland, are regulators saying, this is fine for now, but we actually want a domestic industry to serve our domestic patients? Or is that less of a concern to them because they don't want to get in the industry? They are, whatever the reason.
Well, I think, what's different in Europe, I mean, it wouldn't be different to you because of your Canadian experience. These are pharmaceutical regulators. These are pharmaceutical auditors. And so they're agnostic. If you can meet the standard, just like they're bringing in medications from all around the world into those markets, just because it's cultivated, no pun intended there, I guess, but just because it's grown, doesn't change the fact that it is a licensed registered piece of medication. And if you have a production facility like we have in Germany, they treat that identically to what we have in Canada. Now, as an example, with Germany, our facilities get audited by German auditors. They fly over from Berlin and they actually physically audit those facilities.
Interesting.
So they're very comfortable, with that. But wouldn't local politicians like more investment into Germany? Absolutely. But, just like other medications, there's not a distinction as long as you can meet the standards that, it can come in from offshore.
Yeah. Super interesting. Miguel, I want to talk about the balance sheet a little bit. You've got about, what is the number? 164 million in cash, no debt. You're making some acquisitions. What does M&A look like, and what's your appetite for that?
Well, cannabis is an interesting industry because it's so many people sort of betting on growth. We, for a long time, have sort of, been in this camp that, financial fundamentals matter. You got to be profitable. You got to have a high margin. Having a big debt load is a negative, and having cash on the balance sheet is a big opportunity. So we're one of the only few companies that have no debt and are in this net cash position. So M&A, we had recently announced a great acquisition down in the Niagara region of Ontario of the Safari Flower Company, an awesome business, GMP, again, consistent with what we like, great producer, serving international markets. And so, that's the type of M&A that we like. Some people are good at being retailers, and the retailers in Canada are having a good run, and we're excited for them. Some people are good, at being distributors or wholesalers. Our real niche is in having one of the largest genetic facilities, developing and producing, world-class medications, and then shipping them and getting them into the markets, and then working with others. So M&A, like you've seen sort of in Germany on the sell side or on the pharmacy side or clinic side, has been, not a focus for us. Also, we don't like competing against our customers. And so you sort of have to pick your lane. Right. So we're more, to use sort of a CPG, analogy, more of an upstream company. And we think that's our real niche, and we're excited about it.
I want to talk a little bit about that sort of focus, because also in the sort of filing was a wind down or sort of a scale back of adult use, or whatever we call it here in Canada, recreational.
Yep.
And is that just sort of the final wind down because the market here is stable or shrinking, or margins aren't good enough, or the other business is just going so well? And what do you think that says about the companies that are sticking around for that? Is it a fool's errand to stick around in adult use in Canada, or is it more there are companies doing really interesting things, but it's so, it's too small really for a company like Aurora?
Yeah, I think because we've always been a medical company, and because that's where our investment is, we always sort of lean that way. I mean, as an example, if you have a GMP facility, you can sell your products for 3 times the amount in Europe that you can in Canada. So there's a financial practicality. Now, if we didn't have GMP and it was a GACP facility, large greenhouse, the economics are a little bit different, and you maybe can make it work. I think it's just everything about Aurora is wired, for that medical experience. I do feel for those folks in the rec business. It's a real challenge, and it's not getting any easier or any less competitive when you look at sort of the baseline financials of it. And so I think that's why you see many of those companies now starting to figure out how can they service international markets, get their GMP certs and whatnot. I mean, Canada is a world leader in cannabis. There's no doubt about it. Whether we're in Australia or Poland or Germany, people want Canadian flower. It's the highest quality. It's the most consistent. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
I know it's going to sound obvious. It's two different businesses, right? What you're set up to do on the medical side is serve patients in Canada and patients in other countries. Whereas a CPG company on the sort of adult use recreational side, it is all about sales distribution, having sales teams, reaching out to retailers. It's a very different format, which some companies are trying to do both, but it is a real challenge.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, in order to do medical well, it's all the product development, it's all the registrations, it's the dossiers. You have to have a team on the ground that can connect with clinicians, prescribing physicians, patients. You have to be able to connect with governments. It's just a totally different, type of business. And it's one we've been in for a long time. And it is where all the growth is. I mean, we talked about the US for a long time. We've said it's medical first. And the US, the FDA is going to be involved. I know people don't want to hear that, and that sort of, scares them. But the FDA will regulate cannabis, which again is why I think those that have experience navigating all these very technical, regulatory regimes will have, an advantage in the U.S.
Yeah. we actually got just an interesting question on YouTube here. Looking out, let's say a decade, Miguel, what is the sort of end game for the global medical or even recreational cannabis industry? Like, if you were moving pieces on a chessboard, how do you see things evolving?
Or risk, like a risk board.
Or risk. Yeah.
Maybe it's better.
I like risk.
Yeah.
That's good Stratego. But
that's a good game.
I think, so first and foremost, this gets lost in the conversation, but medical cannabis is medicine. So we are so honored to service the veterans and our patients in Canada. They are using these products for significant conditions in a lot of different ways. And so the evolution of that, one of the great sort of untold stories about the US announcement is around research and the opening up of, traditional style research. And again, the largest deal that's ever been done in cannabis was for a very important drug called Epidiolex around childhood seizures between GW Pharma and Jazz, a $10 billion deal. That's the future of medical cannabis, which is more and more patients and doctors and governments recognizing the medicinal value of these products. And that's growing, and that's going to be a huge business. And I think at some point you'll see more and more pharmaceutical companies starting to get into that aspect of it. And I think that's going to be a huge win for the cannabis companies that have been focused on that because of all that direct experience. And there is no doubt that recreational cannabis is a big business. I mean, the THC, hemp beverage business in the US, just as an example of how quickly, you can see these products gain mainstream acceptance in a different format. And we'll see what brings with the new farm bill in September. But overall, this is going to be a growing business. You haven't seen cannabis go backwards. Everybody talks about,
right,
these regulatory challenges and this and that. It's not going backwards. It may slow up and it may end up in some places just medical and not rec, but nowhere has it gone backwards. And I think there's so many good reasons for that. So I think in 10 years, the stigma, the mainstream approach, you'll have, to your point, Jeremy, there'll absolutely be a CPG, rec lane, big brands, large distribution, but there's clearly at that point going to be clinical trials, medicinal, avex, and these products will be mainstream to service some very important conditions that we see people using today, that is there. And also untapped ones. We see a lot of exciting things in, different aspects of it. So, we're excited about that future.
I just in my mind, I just created Cannabis Risk, the game of strategic conquest around global domination of the cannabis space, and I got to noodle about and see what the board looks like and what the pieces look like. But I do think there's something there. It's a pretty small audience of people interested, but I think it would be a real winner.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah, there's something to it. But well, I guess I'm partly joking, but in Aurora boardrooms, I'm sure there's not a risk game, but we're putting pieces. But there is a bit of like, what is next, right? There's Germany, there's Poland, UK, other EU markets where the threshold is going to be here for EU-GMP. And, I guess so fully blown out thinking about this sort of chess game or board game, like, it's not infinite growth, but like, what are the next countries you're eyeing or is the EU eyeing as possible, possible markets?
Well, I mean, just first and foremost, the limiter right now in Germany is GMP flower. That's the limiter. So everybody is chasing what has been a strengthening standard, which we like in Germany. So if you have GMP flower right now, you are absolutely in the preferred position as Germany, and we think the other countries are going to go that way. And so you asked about the risk board. Our approach is we take the most restrictive environment because we grow the same products for every market. And then we apply that to everything so that we can move things around. Europe is really exciting. You've got countries that have sort of dabbled in cannabis that are now moving forward in a bigger way. Spain, Italy, and France would be sort of in that group. You've also got new countries coming on. Ukraine, which is, we had at our facility, very interested in cannabis as a veteran benefit because of the horrible situation there. Huge markets like Turkey are talking about bringing it on. Smaller countries like Switzerland and Austria, and over half of the EU countries now have a legal medical cannabis benefit. And reimbursement is a component of that, so it goes through mainstream insurance. And the current markets, the big ones, all are growing. In Germany, as big as it is still less than 1% of the adult population is in any form of the medical cannabis benefit. And, Canada, as an example, is about 2x that. So there's tons of opportunity if you can do it right.
Can I ask you I don't know if it's a more nuts and bolts, but an operational question. Say you are an American company, you see Schedule 3, you have these grow facilities in 4 or 5 states, but they're not EU-GMP. Like, is it impossible? I mean, the lift on the regulatory or financial side to turn one of those facilities into EU-GMP, notwithstanding the fact that they got to figure out if they can export it at all. Is that even worth it? Like, I mean, will companies even consider that? Or is it like focus on what you're good at? Like if you were in that spot, like is the hurdle just too high?
It depends how it was built. So our facilities, listen, I know I'm on a tear about saying how great Canada is, but the Canadian cannabis facilities were built with GMP in mind. Right. And so, part of the GMP certification is going to be all about, pathogen reduction and airflow and the ability to separate, and have these sort of core, like you would with any other pharmaceutical, to reduce contaminants and all that. It's a challenge with a grown plant. So, if you didn't build it with that in mind, the retrofit would be very, very expensive. It's not impossible. Now, some of the U.S. facilities, to be fair, were built with sort of that in mind, and so they would have a easier lift. They're not, structured that way today because they don't have to. So, I mean, not to speak for them, but I think, they'd have to decide how much upside is there in U.S. business, which is non-GMP required, versus the benefits of going offshore. And once you have a GMP facility, that's only a third of the battle.
Right.
Then you've got to go and hire the people and have the expertise to get the products registered, do the stability work. That takes a year. So it's not just money, it's also timing. So Germany's a year, Poland's probably 18 months. And then you need to have people on the ground that can navigate the regulatory regime and compete against a pretty, strong competitive set of folks that got, 10 years on it. Now, listen, some of those great American brands obviously would resonate. And so there is that component to it. But, we'll have to see. I know a couple of them have talked about, exporting. My only flip on the export will be, if flower's leaving the US and going to Germany, we would love to see flower from Germany end up back in the US, so it goes both ways,
Yeah.
Right. We're coming up on time. I have one more question, Miguel. Another far-looking question, sort of the barbarians at the gate aspect. With, rescheduling in the US, do you think big pharma companies are starting to kind of sniff around the margins of these medical cannabis firms? And how do you see, maybe some takeover targets evolving in the future?
Yeah, I mean, and we'll have to see. I mean, it hasn't, you haven't seen anything yet. I think if this was an isolated molecule, say in a pressed tablet,
right,
that they could just plug and play into their system, that would be there. I think there's a couple things that make it challenging for them. One is it's early on the science. So they like to see clinical trials. They like to see a little piece. And we're all really excited about that because we're very hopeful on it. So I think it's early days on the science side. Secondly, they do not grow and cultivate, these type of medicines, either on the development side or all the way through. And third is they don't have that type of regulatory expertise. So, as we saw maybe with tobacco companies or with alcohol companies, if someone starts, maybe a whole bunch of people get there. That all being said, if you talk to prescribing physicians and clinicians, they like some aspects of cannabinoids way better than other medications. And there definitely is an interplay with patients finding benefits from, cannabinoids and cannabis-based products versus these other medications. And that part's compelling. So we'll see. But it is a very nuanced and challenging industry, and we think we'll definitely be competitive against even the largest of those folks that they choose to get in.
Well, this has been a great conversation, even though it's Monday. No, especially because it's Monday, maybe.
Yeah.
We really do appreciate your time, Miguel, and insight, because I think that the world cannabis landscape or the cannabis risk board game is changing, but maybe not as rapidly as sort of the conversation would suggest it is, right? Because it is a challenging game to play, just like risk itself. And we appreciate the time giving us the landscape. So thanks so much.
Absolutely, we really appreciate all your coverage of the industry, and go Marlies.
Go! Yeah. Oh wow, that's a man after my own heart, Jeremy. Miguel, thanks so much. We'll check in with Odie down the road.
See you guys.
Bye, y'all.